Tēnā koutou katoa, ko mai Cosman toka whenua. Hello there, my name's Mike Cosman, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this fourth module of the Government Health and Safety Lead Mentally Healthy Work programme. I'm an independent health and safety consultant. Now I've been working in the broader field for about 45 years, but I'm probably the first to accept that I'm not an expert when it comes to mentally healthy work. So really the focus of this session is around helping you in governance and leadership roles to think about how you can lean in to this complex and challenging topic without being expert, but actually providing the support, the leadership, the oversight, and the direction that will help your teams and your organization to actually start to come to grips with this particular topic. Some of you may have seen my face before. I've been involved in delivering the Officer Development Programme for the Government Health and Safety Lead for a number of years, and also working with the Institute of Directors. Prior to that, I was part of the Government Health and Safety Task Force that was set up after Pike River, and I've been involved in a number of other strategic initiatives. But despite all of that experience, I have to say that mentally healthy work, psychosocial risk, whatever you want to call it, is one of those areas that I really find particularly challenging to deal with and to give advice on, because it is so diverse, so all-encompassing, so different for every organization. But that doesn't mean that I walk away from it. It means that I need to walk to it. I need to understand how I can help my clients to make a difference. And in this particular case, how to help you to make sense of what you've heard in the previous modules and to apply that governance lens to it. You're probably aware about the Institute of Directors' 4 pillars of good governance, which is a framework that applies to any organization and really any aspect of the governance activity. The first pillar is about determining purpose. So if we think about that in the context of mentally healthy work, how does this fit in with our organizational purpose? How does having a mentally healthy workforce and a thriving workplace actually contribute to our overall objectives as an organization? Because it's not just a nice to have, it's not just a legal obligation, it's actually something which hopefully, if we get it right, will contribute to us achieving our broader organizational objectives. The second pillar is about an effective governance culture, and we tend to talk in this context about diversity and about having good governance conversations. Something you'll hear me talk about in a few moments is the notion of courage and vulnerability, because when we're talking about mentally healthy work, as you'll have heard in the previous modules, this is something which affects all of us. It's not like some of the other risks which only particular groups of people are exposed to. Every one of us is in a state of mental health, whether that be at the positive end of the spectrum, thriving, or whether we're actually struggling and potentially suffering mental harm. And so if we're going to have really robust conversations at a governance level, we need to create an environment in which it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I'm not okay. It's okay to talk about personal experiences, because if we as leaders are able to talk about those things, then it creates a climate to then have difficult and challenging conversations about what the risks are for our people. The third pillar is around holding to account. Obviously, in the public sector, very often we have this quasi-governance arrangement where we don't have an independent board. So this function is about looking at the organization as a whole, taking off our operational management lens and applying a whole of organizational lens to say, how are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? How are we supporting our people to achieve? And what is the outcome of that? And that will obviously help us with the fourth pillar, which is about managing risk and ensuring compliance. And health and safety and mentally healthy work is clearly part of that compliance agenda under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So if there was no other reason for wanting to focus on this issue, then clearly it is something that is expected of us. And as you'll see from the overseas experience and a number of cases here in New Zealand, particularly through the employment court, this is getting much more focus and attention in recent times. Again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the 6 elements of due diligence from the Health and Safety at Work Act, which impact on you individually as officers and leaders in your organisation. I think what's important is we do clearly differentiate the roles of the PCBU of your organisation from your individual roles in governance. So the primary duty sits with the PCBU. They have to identify the risks, manage the risk, implement controls, monitor the effectiveness of controls. But our role is one of risk governance. So how are we creating the context, setting the tone from the top, ensuring that we have an understanding of the principles around managing psychosocial risk, creating mentally healthy workplaces, so that as leaders, as governors, we're able to ensure that this is included as part of our risk profile, that we are endorsing the approach that the organisation is going to take, that we are monitoring the outcomes and verifying that, in fact, we are keeping our people healthy and safe. The Institute of Directors and WorkSafe produced new guidance to help to actually clarify what are the kind of governance attitudes and behaviours that will deliver good outcomes. And what that does is to try and create a vision, a set of principles, and a number of leadership and governance practices, which are sometimes referred to as the 5 C's. So we're going to unpick some of those principles in a moment and think about how to apply them through the lens of mentally healthy work. But as I've already indicated, I think that we need to start with ourselves. So one of the 5 C's is around care. Undertaking our governance activities from a position of genuinely wanting to care for our people leads on to curiosity. So ensuring that we do think quite critically about where in our organisation those risks can arise, who is exposed to them, under what circumstances. It's about having those courageous conversations, acknowledging where we're not doing so well, where we need to actually improve. It's about thinking about capability. So very often we've upskilled ourselves and our teams based on the traditional view of largely safety-related risks. We may have moved into the broader area of occupational health, but what capability do we have and do we have access to, which is specifically targeting the knowledge, the skills and expertise around mentally healthy work? And you'll see the other C is also about context. So every organisation has a unique context, both in terms of the nature of the work that it undertakes, the people it interacts with, the environments which can create potentially unsafe exposures to mental harm. And it will be at different stages of maturity. So we need to be really clear. Are we at a foundational level where we're really just starting to explore the issue? Are we reasonably mature that we've got a number of programs and initiatives in place and we're looking to go from good to great? So those 5 C's are really important reflection points to put us in the best position to engage effectively with this complex and challenging topic. So let's unpack those 5 principles. And the first one is learn and develop. As officers, as directors, as senior leaders, we need to make sure that we know enough about the topic in order to become intelligent consumers of the information and the support and the programs that are being presented to us. So you'll have heard about some of the things that the Government Health and Safety Lead is doing in this space. There are other organisations such as the Business Leaders Health and Safety Forum. There's guidance from WorkSafe and others. So we need to get ourselves up to a level at which we can have a meaningful conversation about these issues, but without in any way, shape or form pretending that we're expert. But equally, we do need to have access to those experts with the relevant skills so that we are being guided in the right direction in a way that will mean that we can invest in programs around mentally healthy work that are more likely to succeed within our operating environment. The second principle is around anticipate and understand. So how can we be forward-looking rather than just responding to what has occurred in the past? What are the questions that we need to be asking of our teams to help us to think about what's coming up? What is the change in the external and internal environment? What's changing in the threat landscape around mentally healthy work that we need to respond to? An obvious issue in this regard is in the post-COVID environment, the general level of distrust and abuse that we're seeing, not just of public servants, but everybody from supermarket workers, bus drivers, and the like. In many ways, we've become a more angry society. We can't change that, but we need to be aware of it, and we need to think about what are the implications in terms of our organizational and individual resilience around those issues. We're embarking on new programs, new initiatives, new ways of working, setting up new teams. We need to be thinking about the impact on mental health of those changes. The next part of our principles is plan and resource. So, a strategy without a plan is the triumph of hope over expectation. A plan which isn't resourced is similarly aspirational. So we need to make sure that what we're planning to do in this space is well grounded in evidence, well grounded in expertise, that it's thought through with the different stages, are carefully planned out, and the resources that we need to implement are made available so that our teams are actually able and equipped to deliver the activity and hopefully achieve the outcome that we're seeking. Because we're talking about a legal context, we have to think about what is the test as to whether we've done all that's reasonably practicable. You're probably aware of how that test is made up. So we need to think about what is the current state of understanding about the hazard, the harm that can be caused, the means of managing and mitigating the harm. Then we need to think about the suitability and availability of those control measures. And then we need to consider whether investing in those measures meets the gross disproportion test. So in other words, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are we looking at spending millions of dollars for marginal impact, or are we talking about making sensible, affordable investments that will deliver market improvements in the mental health and well-being of our teams? You may be aware of the recent court case in the employment court where the University of Auckland was being challenged by Associate Professor Susie Wiles in relation to the online and physical threats and abuse that she was facing as being one of the key spokespeople in the COVID pandemic. Now, her role at the university was not just her specific area of research, but actually as a science communicator. And the university took great credit for her ability to take complex science and to present it to a wider non-scientific audience. She was highly in demand from the media, making sense of the complex and rapidly changing COVID environment. But as the public mood changed, she and other people in a similar situation became the target for really hateful abuse and threats. And she felt that the university didn't do enough to protect her from those threats. And ultimately, having failed to secure the protection that she thought was appropriate, she ended up having to take the university to the employment court on the basis that they had not acted in good faith and that they'd failed to provide her with a safe working environment. And although the university had done quite a number of things ultimately the employment court found in Susie Wild's favour and indicated that the university had not been focused sufficiently on providing her with that safe working environment in the changing circumstances that arose in that particular highly toxic environment. There is activity happening in the courts. It may not necessarily be initiated by WorkSafe, but it is something that we need to be aware of, and we need to be in a position to demonstrate that we've acted in good faith, that we've looked after our people. The fourth principle is about trust and verify. We're not there to micromanage as governors. We're there to set the tone from the top, to set the strategy, identify the priorities, allocate resources, monitor outcomes, and drive continuous improvement. So that does require a high degree of trust between us and our management teams and our staff, but that trust is not unwavering. We do need to put in place mechanisms to constantly test, assure, and verify ourselves that the things that we've asked people to do are being done, that they are effective, and that we are achieving the outcomes that we're looking for. Simply counting activity as a measure of effectiveness is unlikely to be sufficient. So the number of referrals to EAP is a metric, but it's not necessarily giving you any insight into whether or not those activities that underline the figures are actually achieving positive outcomes. So we need to think more imaginatively about what does success look like in this space. We also need to think about how we monitor and respond. So if we are building in those feedback loops, what do we do with the information and the insights that we're getting? How do we respond to them? How do we drive that continuous improvement process? Plan, do, check, act is the mantra that many people adopt for continuous improvement. And the only way that we can do that is if we are constantly looking for insights into organizational performance. So different organizations will have put in place different programs. And if we have an intervention strategy around those, then we should have some degree of evaluation built in. If training and awareness raising is part of the program, then we don't just want to know how many people have attended the training. We want to know, was it helpful? Did they gain value from it? Is awareness of particular resources and facilities actually driving people to engage with them? Thinking and asking our subject matter experts to more clearly define the intervention journey, the logic that goes behind it, and building those points of evidence into the system will enable us, when we're looking at it through a governance lens, to be able to see that continuum from raising knowledge, raising action, and actions delivering outcomes. And then the final part is really to pull it all together and say, what have we achieved? Have we been successful? Will we continue to be successful in the changing operating environment? Governing and managing mental health risks is unlike other risks, requires a completely different mindset, requires access to different resources. We have to be adaptable, we have to be dynamic, we have to be context specific. It includes those two components, which is about the risks to people's mental health that arise directly through our work and the way we conduct our work, but it also has to reflect the impact of people's state of mental health when they come to work on their performance of that work in the workplace. You've heard from Philip Voss and the Hilary Bennett's work about mental health being universal, dynamic, variable, and complex. So we all have it. We're on a different state of mental health every day. It changes, and the causes and the consequences are highly variable. So that makes it a wicked problem. And the thing about a wicked problem is that it doesn't lend itself to simple solutions. So our solutions need to be multifactorial. They need to address different people, their needs in different ways. I think we all know that the consequences of getting this wrong can be devastating. They can be devastating for individuals who at the extreme can end up taking their life. I've seen that occur in a number of workplaces, and I never want to see it again. So that's the really bad side that we're trying to avoid. The really good side is that if we get this right, then it enables us to create thriving, high-performing, successful teams, which means that we are much more able to deliver on our organizational objectives. We're going to reduce staff turnover rates. We're going to have people who are working better as teams because we've created that cohesive environment which respects people's individual circumstances, supports them where they need to be supported, and encourages them to give of their best at work. My final message to you is, if you haven't already done so, start to take that first step, start to move down that journey, be very conscious and aware of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Don't try and solve all the issues in one go, but do start. Do think about the importance of this issue to people, to your organization, to the objectives that you're trying to achieve, to the role of the public sector in supporting others. And hopefully, if we can make the right choices in terms of what we do, then as governors, we'll be able to not only demonstrate that we've exercised due diligence, but that actually we've made our organizations more successful and our people going home in at least as good, if not a better state than when they arrived at work in the morning.